Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, in this program, we're going to get an update on Pennsylvania's cyber schools. We're going to talk about a little bit about what they do and why they do it, and then the Pennsylvania Chamber will have its annual economic climate survey, all after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, we're going to spend a little time this morning on education, basic education in particular. Joining me, as often is the case, is Nick Trombetta. He is the CEO of the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, and Larry Jones of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Cyber Charter Schools. Long titles, but we got them out. Nick, as always, welcome on the program.
Glad to
have you here. Larry, welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here. All right, Nick, let me start with you. For many of our viewers out there who are looking at educational opportunities for their kids, cyber schools are maybe something of a mystery to some. I mean, explain for our viewers what a cyber school is and what you all do.
Yeah, well, we're public schools. All charter schools are public schools, and I guess cyber charter schools are probably the most public of them all, because a student can receive education via the internet and other electronic means wherever that student might be. The quality is the same. The instruction is delivered by Pennsylvania certified, highly qualified teachers. And then that's how they receive their education, through the computer. Not to get so technical, but pretty much more and more families are finding out that this is a viable option for them, and they're selecting them. About 20,000 families now in Pennsylvania choose cyber charter schools. Now,
Larry, you actually run a cyber charter school, is that correct?
No, I actually run a brick-and-mortar charter school.
A brick-and-mortar. I'm glad. Point that out. Talk about what's a brick-and-mortar.
A brick-and-mortar charter school is, again, a public charter school that is operated like a traditional school within a building, where the vast majority of our educational services are given in what you may call a traditional manner, where our teachers are in the building, in the classrooms, and the kids come to us every day, and that's how we deliver our instruction. And we, again, are public school. We open up to all students within our geographic area. And the big difference between what we do and what you would find at a cyber school
is important. Now, everybody, but go ahead, spell that out.
Is number one, the delivery of instruction, where our instruction is mostly delivered through face-to-face. The teachers are in the room with students. The cyber charter schools allow students to receive instruction through the computer and using technology. And it's a rigorous instruction, it's a sound instruction, it's an option that parents choose for a variety of reasons. And I think whether you're talking about brick-and-mortar charter schools or cyber charter schools, that choice that parents are given is very important.
Yeah. Nick, talk a little bit about the growth of cyber schools. Now, you've been on this program on a number of occasions. Sometimes, talking about cyber schools, sometimes talking about educational policy. Sure. You're a former school superintendent, something you know a good bit about. Talk about the growth of, I mean, if you're out there and let's say a family is looking at sort of an option, what would you tell them about why they should consider cyber schools or a brick-and-mortar charter school?
It really is a family decision, and it's their choice. And within their own set of circumstances of what the options might or might not be in their own location. For cyber charter schools, families choose us for a whole host of reasons, whether it's for a safety issue of where they're from, or where there might be violence in some schools. And there aren't a lot of schools where that might have that issue, but some do.
Right.
And then the other issue is whether the quality of the curriculum is what they want for their child, or whether their child fits in that setting. It's maybe not be a good fit for them. So they come to us, and we put together a plan that fits and works for their child and their student. And but the bottom line is, Terry, is that it really is the parental family choice to select a public school that meets their needs.
And how much have you grown? I mean, take a history. When did you all start?
We started in 2000, and we anticipated that year, in 2000, how naive we were, that we would have 50 students. That first year, we had 527.
Right.
This year, 8,000.
Okay.
Just in our school. There are 11 cyber charter schools in the state, and between all of us together, are 20,000 students.
And how about your growth?
In terms of charter schools or in terms of my specific school?
How about both?
Okay, well, my specific school, we started out, we're a small school. We started with 180 students,
right.
And now we're at 400 students. The difference is that we have a cap in Philadelphia. Our building has capacity for more than the 400 students.
Right.
We have a waiting list and have had a waiting list every year, but because of the policies in Philadelphia, we can only accept 400 students.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about one of the funding issues that the cyber and charter schools are having. We'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're chatting about cyber schools and cyber charter schools with Larry Jones and Nick Trombetta. Larry, you wanted to make a point about how important you think the choice aspect of this kind of schooling is. Go ahead, make your point.
Definitely. This is really the first time in Pennsylvania's history that parents have an opportunity to make a choice in public education. In the past, if a parent had the financial wherewithal to be able to choose a private school or a different type of education, they were able to make that choice for their child based on what was best for their student. Now, with charter schools, a parent can make a choice, and it doesn't cost them anything. It's a free public school. I've had students who have come to me, and we've referred them to cyber charter schools because that would be
more appropriate,
and the parents thought that. We've had students who have come to us from cyber charter schools. So not every child is right for every school. And with the cyber charter school movement and the charter school movement, we're actually giving parents a choice in how their children are going to be educated. And it's a choice that goes across all lines, financial lines, geographic lines. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that we've been able to do. And if I could add one more thing, when you bring choice to anything, you also bring competition and accountability. Each and every one of us in the cyber school and charter school, brick and mortar world, understand that if we're not serving our students appropriately, they can get up and leave. And then we're finished.
Right.
And this is something that is new to education, but I think it's going to drive the quality of education.
Right, Nick, let's talk. Last spring, there was a debate that took place in the legislature over the funding of cyber schools. I think there was a proposal that would have reduced cyber charter school funding by more than 50%. Get into that a little bit and why you think that was important, or the debate was important.
Yeah,
anyway,
I really feel now, looking back on it, that these 4 hearings that we had were really opportunities for us to make the case for these families and for these children to be able to receive this sort of education. I think we found out how much folks didn't know about what we do.
Right.
And so these were learning opportunities, these moments to get out there to speak to those, even the opponents, to learn a little bit more about this form of education. So at the end of the day, for us, we felt it was valuable. I think the legislators that attended understand a lot more that the rights of these parents and these families need to be protected, that these children are receiving a quality education that Larry had mentioned,
right.
And that it's something that Pennsylvanians want, because if they didn't want the growth that we talked about earlier, you don't go from 50 students to 20,000 students in 7 years unless you're doing something. I think, Terry, the most important thing is that people will tell you what they want because they can vote with their feet. I have 501 competitors for these children. And it has forced them, 501 school districts, to rethink what they're doing. And I think that's a good thing for everyone that we reevaluate.
What happened to the funding?
Well, they're talking about it. I mean, they...
Weren't you part of the regular budget process?
Well, there's the state law requires that we receive 75% of per pupil expenditure.
That's right.
And some people felt that 75% of the per pupil expenditure was too much.
Right.
We're doing already, we're doing more with less now, in our view, and in their view, we're getting too much.
But they didn't change that
changed.
consideration in the budget. Go ahead.
Not at this time. It has not been changed.
So when we went through the budget debate, the 16-day late budget that we talked about on this program, and it didn't change the particular aspect of the law that gives you that percentage that you're talking about.
That's what these hearings were mainly about, from one point of view. But from our point of view, it was to educate the folks. They did not change that. That discussion is being continues right now. And our point of view is that we're going to defend the rights of these families, defend the rights of these Pennsylvania taxpayers, so they can receive the education that they want.
Now, is this a kind of an issue that is going to come up only at the budget cycle? I mean, now that the legislature is back in session, they're into a whole bunch of other issues. We've got about 30 seconds left. Do you think there's going to...
I don't think that there's going to be significant movement, but I think that this is going to be an issue that's continually discussed.
You agree with that?
I agree with that, yes.
Yeah. All right, well, look, thanks for the update. All right, when we come back, we're going to hear from the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce and Industry, their annual economic climate survey. We did this last year. It's pretty important. We'll see you back here in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Now joining me is Gene Barr. He's Vice President for Government and Public Affairs with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Gene, welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
All right, you all released just recently, in early September, I guess, your annual economic survey, business survey, I guess, the business climate in the state.
Right.
And we want to talk a little bit about this. This is an important subject. You represent the businesses that create the jobs. You are on the production side,
right.
Obviously critically important to the economy of the state. Let me start out with sort of a general question. How would you characterize the business climate in the state of Pennsylvania at this point?
Well, I think the real question is how will business owners, CEOs characterize that, and they have for us. This is our 17th annual survey. It was done roughly July time period, hundreds of businesses across Pennsylvania. And there are some things in there that from our perspective are rather disturbing. And again, this is the sense that the business owners, CEOs have. And what they found is that there are more people, there are a plurality of people who feel that directionally we're headed in the wrong direction versus right direction. And yes, some of that is due to what's going on at the national level. You can't divorce what happens in PA from the national side. But there is more pessimism we're seeing this year than last. There's less planned investment this year tan last, and that's certainly a dangerous direction too. Good. That's not good.
Right. How did this? How long have you been
17
doing this
years.
survey? 17
years. Every year we do this.
Is this a little better, a little worse than, let's say, the surveys over the past couple of years? How would you?
Well, this is unfortunately this year seems to be. It certainly is worse than the last year or two. And of course, as with everything else, everything runs in cycles. And what we're seeing this year is we're seeing kind of a downward cycle. And again, some of that due to nationally, but some of it due to some issues that have bubbled up here in Pennsylvania that are huge concerns. And not new concerns, but concerns that are growing for business owners and operators here in Pennsylvania, such as health care costs. We found legal reform to be coming back in again as people are getting more and more concerned about the absence of real legal reform here in Pennsylvania for businesses. So we're seeing things that have been there, maybe below the surface. Surprisingly, we're seeing property taxes beginning to rise as a concern for businesses, which we haven't seen in many years. Right. It's always been the corporate net income and other actions, but maybe as a result of all the discussions about property taxes, that's rising on the concern for business owners as well.
And as you know, for years it's been the intractable state problem, despite everybody's maybe best efforts.
It's only taken decades to try and get here, right?
Yeah, whatever is going on,
right.
It's still not been done. All right, let's talk a little bit about. I don't think we need to get into the mechanics of the survey, but as you pointed out, you interviewed hundreds of people, correct, hundreds of business owners. So you feel this is pretty representative. Yes. Right,
and it's all across the state too, as well. It's all segments of the state.
Sort of what we would consider to be the more prosperous regions, such as the southeast and the northeast, and the less prosperous regions like the southwest, let's say, where they're more struggling,
and so forth. Exactly.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the specifics of it and take up some of what the survey showed. Let's go through some of these issues. Let's take health care first.
Sure.
How important a priority?
Significant. And of course, as businesses become more and more concerned, and we've seen this, more and more businesses dropping health care coverage, simply saying, I cannot afford to provide this anymore. And as we all know, businesses fail to provide health care, not because they don't like their employees, don't want to see them healthy, sure, they flat out can't afford to do it. And unfortunately, the state government is sending conflicting signals. At the time when we're all evidencing huge concerns over health care costs, state government continues to pursue mandates to place on insurers that unfortunately make insurance more expensive and more difficult. At some point, some business simply says, and we're looking at mandates now that could add 5% or more to the cost of a premium. At some point, a business says, I'm sorry, that was the last one, I can't do it anymore.
We're going to go to break, but I want to ask you this question. Now, not this survey, but you've been around a long time. You think health care for businesses is the #1 issue for them, would you say?
At this point, based on our survey, it's certainly right at the top with all of the others.
All right, we're talking with Gene Barr on the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry's annual business climate study. We'll continue with this discussion following these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by HIGHMARK Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy. And by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. I'm talking with Gene Barr from the Pennsylvania Chamber about their economic survey done over the spring and summer months. Gene is here to report on it. Gene, let's talk a little bit about some other aspects of it. One has to do with the big debate that is now going on in this state over the Alternate Energy Fund.
Correct.
We've done a number of programs on it. We'll continue to do some more on it. What were the business owners saying about that?
Well, it showed some very interesting numbers on that. We asked what they thought about the electricity tax that the governor's proposed and the $850 million in borrowing that's been proposed. And overwhelmingly, that was rejected. I believe it was something like 64 to 29%. Even of those who supported the tax and the borrowing, once we asked them again, well, if indeed alternative energy does turn out to be more expensive, would you still support it? And that declined by another 0.25%. So clearly there's a lot of concern about a new tax being proposed. There's a lot of concern about borrowing close to $1 billion that will be expended in a 2 or 3 year period, but take a quarter century for our kids and grandkids to pay off.
Yeah. One of the other things that I noted the report talked about had to do with transportation. Boy, what a debate we've had in this state, over how to fund badly needed roads and bridges. And I presume that's an important subject. I mean, road and bridge repair, pretty important to the business community. How we make sure roads and bridges are, adequately funded. What
Safe,
did you all
available? And it's very interesting where the business community comes out. As you've pointed out, there are many people with huge concerns over the safety and availability of roads and bridges and so forth. On the other hand, we have many employers who rely extensively on mass transit in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So, of course, the dollars taken from the tolls in many cases are going to be going to mass transit. Many of the companies in Pennsylvania are having to think about the trade-off, including many companies heavily engaged in transportation. We have companies who rely on mass transit to take 75% of their employees at a location in. So they've really got to think about what we need to do relative to that.
Well, I mean, I think that's in one respect, while the debate in Harrisburg has been trying to balance, you know, put sufficient money in mass transit, but as you know, the mass transit systems are not arguably in need of reform because of the way they operate on the one hand versus the roads and bridges. And you know, the big debate has been about how much money do you put in one versus the other. And then and you didn't ask any questions about tolling Route 80, and that you didn't get into the details of that.
At that point, we did not, because that whole tolling issue came up.
Sure.
You know, before that was done. But clearly, you know, that's something that the business community is looking at relative to where mass transit. We believe that you probably should take a look at whether or not the routes are properly set up, because in our view, many of the routes potentially were set up 40, 50 years ago, may not be serving where the population and work centers are.
Yeah. Well, that's that whole business of reforming, you know, and part of the big debate in Harrisburg. You know, one of the other things, we haven't done a lot of shows on this in recent months, but we did a lot on earlier, and that has to do with this whole question of legal reform.
Yes.
You think, I guess your survey results showed a renewed concern by the business community over what we generally call tort reform.
Yes.
What did the survey find?
Well, there's two things I think that show why legal reform is rising in terms of concern. One is, in and of itself, to the business community, that is companies perceived as deep pockets. That is someone who can be sued when they may be minimally liable, 1%, 2%, 3%, and perhaps be forced to pay 100% of the judgment. Hugely unfair. We passed a Fair Share Act that would reform that. Unfortunately, Governor Rendell vetoed that after having campaigned in support of it. But there's another reason why legal reform is critically important and ties into the health care debate, because we know from our discussions with the medical community that it plays in significantly to the practice of defensive medicine, where tests are prescribed solely to make sure that we've covered all our bases, and while it's probably not likely, trying to minimize this risk of being sued is so pervasive that it's resulted in a lot of cases, unnecessary tests, driving up the cost of health care. So we've got to look at reform of joint and several. We believe we've got to look at caps, because if health care is as much of a crisis as people say that it is, then in our view, we probably need to take extraordinary steps to address it.
All right, thanks for coming in, chatting about the survey. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.